Speakers for the groups now. First of all, for the EPP, Markus Pieper for 2 minutes.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Commissioner for this report. In this report, and we welcome this, it says that we've already met the 2020 goals. It's excellent that we are separating economic growth from energy use. That's good. We're in the middle of the energy transition, so that is good. However, we mustn't make the mistake, particularly in the corona crisis. Let me put a question to the Commission. When we discussed the same report last year, it said, I quote, "The clean energy package forms a credible path to meeting its Paris meeting agreements." End of quote. Why, 12 months ago, was there still 40% was enough for CO2 reduction, and for lorries and cars it was quoted as an ambitious policies on climate mobility, I quote. In the report for 2020, I cannot see this reply, only a reference to the fact that it has to be at least 55%. The Parliament even wants 60%. I'm also in favour of stronger targets, but just like with medicine, sometimes too much is a bad thing. Our people, our companies are also involved in helping to achieve Paris, but they need security. They don't want knee-jerk panic reactions. Instead of tightening the screw ever tighter, we have to have a precautionary approach. COVID is saying, because of COVID, energy poverty has increased. And then the renovation. What about tenants? We are putting too much on their shoulders. The Commission is talking about energy efficiency, but the Commission is saying there could be new rights of complaint for NGOs and associations. We have to decide, do we want modern infrastructure, biodiversity, clean air, or do we want to allow NGOs to go to court to save bats? We do not need the right of legal proceedings, but we need more rapid authorization. We need to make the COVID Recovery Fund binding for energy efficiency. We're on the right path, but let's not try to speed things up too much, otherwise it will scupper it.
Thank you very much. Mr. González Casares has the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. The Energy Union is vital for our society and for transition to climate neutrality. In order to make it reality, we need to focus on our clear problems. There is no union without interconnection. The Iberian Peninsula is isolated in this way. We can see that energy reductions targets for 2020 will be met. Hopefully, it's not only as an impact of the pandemic, but we still have 34 million people suffering from energy poverty. They don't have the money to heat their homes. In the report, we can also see that we are falling behind in research and development in Europe. So we should promote this and focus on patents. The commitment should... well, we've seen a 60% reduction target, and we have a long-term emission reduction target. We have the Green Deal. We have lots of points which are linked together, and we need to drive them all forward, and let's not be beaten by scepticism or the economic crisis caused by this pandemic. Thank you.
For the Renew Group, Mr. Peterson, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner for the good report. It says that the EU should show the way in the green transition now. We need to act now and deliver the goods. We need to have more energy going across the borders in a real single market for energy. It would make it easier and cheaper to integrate energy from the offshore windmill farms off the European coasts, and that would enable us to reduce fossil fuels, which is why this strategy is so important, dear Commissioner. The investments for the entire package need to be green. I would say that in Europe we need a competitive green industry in sustainable energy and ensure that our companies are world-class and remain there. We need a more integrated energy system. We must create it to give our citizens green, affordable energy. This initiative you talked about is very good. It creates jobs, but it has to be ambitious so we can renovate 2.5 to 3 times more buildings than we do today. And we will have to revise some of the directives as well. The directives of energy efficiency and the role buildings play. We need more ambitious goals in them. They need to be compulsory for the member countries. The International Energy Agency says that half of green investments should focus on energy efficiency. At the same time, we should also ensure that member countries deliver the goods. They don't at the moment, so I would ask the Commissioner to put pressure on the member countries. If the Commission won't do it in the coming years, the green transition won't happen. But we owe it to our voters to get started. Let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the ID Group, Mr. Buchheit has the floor.
Frau Kommissarin, auch
Thank you very much, President. Thank you, Commissioner, for the introduction. The Energy Union could have been a great project. It could have helped citizens with EU-wide cooperation. However, when we look at it, the wind's been taken somewhat out of the sails here. I think there's a lot of ideology and terminology here rather than real objectives and taking on the concerns of companies and citizens rather than focusing on realpolitik. Ladies and gentlemen, ensuring security of supply, sustainability, these aspects were meant to be the guiding principles of the last few years. And we have these terms again within the Energy Union project, but this hides the reality. When we look at the last 10 years, the electricity prices have gone up 28% for private households in Germany. We see taxes have gone up in this area too. It's going to be a real price shock in coming years when we look at diesel and petrol prices that are going to shoot up as well. So these are indicators which are going in the wrong direction. Even with the contributions of green energy, things are not going in the right direction. Germany has to import energy into the country. So security of supply is simply not the reality. So we need to think about the terminology that we're using here. There's going to be 6,000 new wind turbines that are going to be built. And this is a huge amount of potential future waste that we are creating, toxic waste, millions of tons in the future. So this is the reality of the Energy Union. It doesn't make sense when we look at the reality. And it's not working in terms of sustainability either. It's time for us here in Parliament to realise that our solidarity should go to the citizens and not to the Commission. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Greens, for 1 minute, Mr. Niinisto.
The State of the Energy Union report highlights both the successes and the failures of the European Union in this field. We have overachieved our climate or the energy targets for renewable energy for 2020, but obviously these targets are still modest. Now when the European Parliament is pushing for a higher ambition of 60% emission reductions by 2030, we have to look for a similar target for renewable energy to hasten the energy transition and also to make sure that it's European industries that creates those jobs in energy revolution. But there are also a lot of failures, and one is obviously the increasing amount of fossil fuel subsidies. We still have in 2018 even more subsidies for fossil fuels than in 2015. The 50 billion we are using on fossil fuel subsidies is 3 times more than the amount that we are spending on wind power in 2018. So the Commission has to force change in this field and has to make sure that the Member States get rid of fossil fuel subsidies like the European Parliament has pushed for.
Σας ευχαριστώ για την ομάδα των συντηρητικών και μεταρρυθμιστών.
Thank you very much. I should like to give the floor now to Mr. Krasnodębski for 1 minute, please.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący. Ja również chciałem zapytać o...
Thank you so much, Chair. I also wanted to ask about public aid because as it seems from the report, it was growing in the last 10 years. In 2018, it was 159 billion euros. And despite the Commission is telling us that it wants to do away with this aid, the increase in different sectors was varying. Transport increased 20% in 2018. And there are differences also in the particular member states. For example, Germany, if I read it correctly, in 2018 spent 45 billion euro of public money for subsidies in energy, including fossil fuels, 12 billion, which is 1.2 of their GDP. Also, France, Italy, Belgium are much more subsidizing much more fossil fuels than, for example, Poland, which is often shown as the country which is trying to stop energy transformation. We only gave 2 billion euro, 0.2 GDP, for fossil fuels. So I'd like to ask the Commission what the Commission is going to do to decrease the subsidies in different sectors, and also according to the economic potential of the member states, and how does it relate to the new Green Deal and just transition? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the GUE, Madam Matias for 1.5 minutes. Thank you very much, President. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here and giving us this presentation. The energy transition is going to be fundamental in our climate action and in job creation. But I did want to raise a question today when it comes to energy poverty and the buildings and how they can be energy efficient. The strategy that you present, it does improve a lot of things when it comes to this approach, but there are some things that we could still improve. We know that our poorest families in the European Union, well, they have about 10% of their revenue that goes to their energy bill. We also know that we're talking about tens of millions of citizens that live in energy poverty. That's more than 50 million, according to data. We also know that the energy poverty goes to single parent families, the elderly, or other families that are struggling. In this sense, member states, even if they have specific measures in place to fight energy poverty, it often is a problem in terms of the definition of critical periods for their energy supply. How can the European Union define what a critical situation is, have a clear definition of that? More than 100 million Europeans live in poverty. That's 1 in every 6 people. Why doesn't the European Union specifically define what these measures are to be able to fight energy poverty? We're entering the winter period, and we know that the entire year is going to be a critical period for these families, and not just occasionally. Thank you. Thank you very much. I should like to...
Bardzo dziękuję.
I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Băsescu for 1.5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The report presents the general situation without analyzing the differences in resources available in the member states. If we analyze the limitations imposed by the climate law recently voted in Parliament and taxonomy regulation, we shall see that in time we shall do away with the energy produced based on coal, hydrocarbons, natural gas included, and also nuclear energy. This means, for instance, for a country such as Romania, that in the next decades to do away with 60% of its sources of energy for the population and the industry. That will turn Romania from an independent country from the energy point of view into a country that will be obliged to massively import electricity. Also, if we have a look at the Fund for a Just Transition, we can see there is a huge discrepancy on the one hand between the objectives we have set and on the other hand the resources we make available in order for the transition to be possible and to have a close or equal impact upon all the member states of the EU. That is the reason why two conclusions should be drawn, I believe. One, and the most important one, that we should set realistic objectives. And the second conclusion, the objectives we set should be fully aligned with the financial resource allocated. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kumpula for 1 minute.
The target for 2050 requires systemic change and involved citizens. EU has taken steps to the right direction and decoupled economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions. In 30 years, EU cut emissions by 25%, while economy grew by 62%. National energy and climate plans show that most member states have cut emissions according to the current reduction targets, but Europe lags behind in energy efficiency target. Renovation wave proposal can become one solution. We have to make it win-win-win. Cut emissions, create local jobs, and make healthier homes and buildings. Renovation rates remain too low, and renovation should be taken to the core of sustainable recovery. The big question in the energy transition is also how to get private investment to support green transition. Climate neutrality 2050 needs investments now. The policy measures need to support predictability and also support demand for clean energy, green products and investments.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Gotes for, I'm not sure how much time.
Energy transition in our history, the biggest problem is not the technology to make it happen, nor is it the political will to cut greenhouse gases. No, our biggest problem is that the perfect is becoming the enemy of the good. And just look at the political debates. No nuclear energy, please. No carbon capture that entails fossil fuels. No biomass. No gas in the transition. No windmills in my backyard. And no solar panels on agricultural grounds, please. Well, altogether, that is not a sustainable posture. How can we possibly be serious in reaching our climate goals without technologies like carbon capture, biomass or nuclear? But luckily, there's one technology we all agree on that has the potential to decarbonize at least our heavy industries and transport: hydrogen. It might not be a silver bullet, but we all agree this energy carrier has enormous potential. And our aim is clear: to create a new, clean-produced green hydrogen market and a long-term certainty for all parties involved. And that requires massive investments in infrastructure, in the scale-up of electrolyzers, but also in carbon capture, utilization and storage, because we need to be realistic. If we want to pave the way for clean hydrogen, we initially will need to invest in transitional technologies, and these might not be perfect, but they are good. So yes, in the beginning of this huge transition, we will still need fossil fuels. And therefore, EU policies should support carbon capture, enable government support schemes for blue hydrogen, and I expect the Commission to move forward in this direction in its Energy Summer package. We have 30 years to reshape our entire energy system, and we can do it. And we will fail if we demand to be perfect, but we will definitely succeed by doing it as good as we can. Thank you.
Σας ευχαριστώ. Το λόγο έχει για 1 λεπτό ο κύριος Μπαρντελά.
Thank you very much. I should like to give Mr. Bardella for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. The Commission has made the energy transition a major objective with a major objective for 2050. So if decarbonisation is the key object, then what's nuclear going to do in all of this context? We know that nuclear is the most economical and decarbonised source of energy that's available to us at present. And France is the second cleanest country when it comes to energy production, according to a university analysis. Now, I've actually drawn your attention to this report and you refuse to read it. We have to look at all the scenarios that are possible, and including the ones that include using nuclear power. Hydrogen is a possible solution, and renewables we're seeing are limited in some respects. So the Commission that seeks to be science-based still follows the gospel of green extremists, and I urge everyone to be fact-based.
Thank you very much. Mr. Solé, 1 minute, please.
Days ago, a study was released signaling the fact that in Barcelona, the city from where I'm speaking today, air pollution still causes 1,000 deaths a year, and to a large extent this is due to the use of fossil fuels. However, despite the broad consensus on the need to accelerate the clean energy transition and step up our efforts concerning emissions reduction, actually fossil fuel subsidies continue to increase. This is one of the findings of the State of the Energy Union report. Madam Commissioner, it's very urgent that we put forward a strategy towards subsidies that is coherent with the Green Deal. The EU should stop subsidizing fossil fuels and should urge member states to stop doing the same, and instead of that, redirect public money to really finance the green energy transition. And this is even more urgent given that, as the report points out, and you, Madam Commissioner, said, funding of the green energy research and investment is slowing, which adds to the huge cuts that the Council is proposing for the research program Horizon Europe, and that, of course, we are opposing head-on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Klock, for 1 minute, please.
Micro, please.
Szanowni Państwo, miesiąc temu...
President, ladies and gentlemen, a month ago, France had to restart its coal plants because an old nuclear plant in Fessenheim was closed and wind farms were unable to keep up with the demand. Germany had to go back to traditional plants and started a coal plant in Dachau. So it shows that energy stability cannot be achieved without fossil fuels. Also, natural gas should be considered an important transitional source of energy. Unfortunately, the green radicalism deprives member states of energy security and independence. So I'm calling for more political realism. If you set objectives that result in absurd costs and result in energy poverty in such a way, we are arriving at a very bad situation for the people in Europe. On top of that, there are costs of the pandemic. We need to start thinking common sense. Let's approach this from a human perspective, not just ideologically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I should like to give the floor to Gürk for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. 5 years ago, we established the European Energy Union. Now the time has come to take stock of results. If we look at the results achieved, what we see is that the Energy Union has been a success story. We have reduced harmful emissions and increased the share of renewables in the energy mix. The European Union is far better prepared to handle shocks on the energy market. It is also worth looking at the lessons we can learn from what has been achieved so far. I believe that with goodwill we can achieve good results, and I too would like to take this opportunity to thank former Commissioner Cañete. Now, looking to the political left of this House, they have turned energy into a political issue. They wish to steer the EU in a direction that would lead to economic stagnation. it would lead to job losses and exorbitant energy costs. I believe that European citizens expect more of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Kohut for one.
Thank you, President. We have managed to overcome many nationalisms, but not all of them. There is still energy nationalism. A large number of member states consider energy security as something that is national, that's something that refers to their particular national or economic interest. But we are a community of values. Free flow of people, capital and services. It's also common responsibility for EU citizens for their energy security. It's a common commitment to fight energy poverty. The Energy Union report shows clearly how much we need solidarity in this area. We have had certain parts of it in place, such as the Just Solidarity Fund, but we need more. We need an actual EU market in energy. We don't need projects that are against this solidarity, such as Nord Stream 2. And about decarbonizing still, we need to precisely set what we want to do, not the percentages or statistics, but actual people who lose jobs in coal mining in my region, Silesia, and they need jobs in other sectors. Let us remember, people are at the center of this. It's people who have to be at the center of this energy transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Danti, for 2 minutes. Thank you very much, President. Thank you, Commissioner. The report on the State of the Energy Union 2020 underscores, and rightly so, the impact of the pandemic on the sector and suggests a recovery phase that would be in line with the digital transition and the green transition. In this sense, I firmly believe that the RRF, and only the RRF, will give a new impetus to the member states that must set at 37% of its amount of money for the transition, the green transition. And this really brings to light the fact that the European Union needs to reduce vulnerability and our dependency on foreign sources by strengthening resilience and diversification of supply lines, as well as our storage capacity. All of the member states should continue to contribute such that the 2030 targets, first and foremost, and also climate neutrality in 2050 be attainable, along with the commitments that we have taken pursuant to the Paris Accord. Now, this does not mean that we have to have a degrowth of the industrial sector, but rather a real green transition in all sectors and rethinking fully all of our behaviors. For example, smart mobility, new types of fuels, and conversion of those high energy industries, and revamping our energy infrastructure. Last point, I'm thinking about hydrogen, and in an integrated energy system would mean that we can move towards climate neutrality in transport and in the building sector throughout Europe. But we're going to need the right amount of resources to develop these energy systems such that our economic systems will be more sustainable, and that is going to mean investment, research. That will mean that we can also increase the competitiveness of renewable energies to meet our supplies and also be in line with our cost.
Our next speaker is Mr. Sofo.
Caucaso, Africa, Medio Oriente, Est Europa, tutte aree dalle quali...
Now, there are a number of geographic areas where we depend on them for energy, and that puts us under their control. That is why Europe, if it wants to be a strong and autonomous geopolitical force, it is going to need energy sovereignty. Energy sovereignty that will mean that will be at the core of the EU Green Deal. So not just running across multinationals that want to behead all of our corporations, focusing on plastic and other things, and not just throwing all of our weight behind electric. We have to make sure that Europe has energy autonomy to make sure that all of the member states meet that autonomy. Italy has everything in line to do just that. We have solar, hydrogen, as well as the tidal wave energy that in Calabria we could make that we could harness that, and as a tourist sector as well. We will be the first to support these types of adjustments. Now, if you are planned to kill our economy for the purposes of following Greta in her campaign, we will be ready to fight back.
Grazie. Das Wort gebeten.
Jutta Paulus.
Sie heute hier sind.
Thank you for your presence here today. I would like to focus on the role of renewables. 3 pieces of good news to be found in your report. Firstly, now renewables account for more than 20% of energy consumption in the EU. Solar and wind-powered electricity doubled between 2010 and 2018. And something very important in this House, renewables are clearly beating fossil fuels and nuclear energy when it comes to generation and job creation. However, the expansion plans by Member States do not go far enough to sufficiently rein in emissions by 2030, so we need a huge effort. We need to pull together. Many citizens know this and are willing to go that far. And so here today, Mrs. Simpson, I call on you to ensure that the clean energy packages rights for citizens are swiftly implemented across all Member States. Then we will have a true energy union. We will bolster renewables, allow democratic energy generation and production, and achieve our climate goals. Thank you. Thank you. Maria Spiraki.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner Simpson. In the report on the European Energy Union really brings to light energy poverty. In the European Union, some progress has been made, generally speaking, but in Greece we've seen that the situation has gotten a lot worse recently, specifically in 2018. 20.2% of the population stated that it was not in a position to be able to heat their home to their satisfaction throughout the entire winter. Europe-wide, we have seen that is around 7%. In Greece, we can see that a portion of the population cannot pay its bills, and the average rate is lower in Europe at 6% when it comes to paying their energy bill. We need to be able to address energy poverty. Having said that, we're going to need overarching programs to renovate buildings and homes, specifically in those areas that are the most affected, with renewable energy as and innovation. We need to be able to mobilize all of the financial instruments that we have available to us, for example, with the European Investment Bank, the private sector, and the European Globalization Adjustment Fund. Thank you.
Herr Carlos.
Mr. Zorinho.
Thank you very much. Today we are debating the state of the Energy Union in a very different context to previous years. The state of the Union in the current context requires us to engage all of our tools and policies towards recovery and resilience. The good governance of Energy Union needs us to take into account the ambition to be leaders in environmental issues. As rapporteur for the Energy Union governments, I'm very pleased to see the Commission's positive assessment of the 27 national energy and climate plans. The 2030 objectives are still within reach. When it comes to interconnections, we're lagging behind. Now, while not losing focus on these targets, I call on everyone to focus on the process and the impact, on guaranteeing clean energy at low prices for families and businesses, on significantly reducing energy poverty, on seeking new ways of storing and transmitting energy, on new technologies such as green hydrogen, and focusing on the Green Deal.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jakob Dalunde.
Tack så mycket, herr ordförande. Jag vill börja med att också tacka.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the European Commission for this very important report. We see how important energy is. The Energy Union is essential. We see that we are still spending more on fossil fuel than renewables, twice as much, 50 billion each year. And so, let me remind you of one point. A few weeks ago, we in the European Parliament talked about the EU climate law for 2030. We voted on it, and we said we needed a real sea change. The climate crisis is acute, and the future is renewables. That's what we need to work towards. Thank you. Thank you. Christian Busoy is our next speaker.
Thank you very much. European Green Deal and Green Recovery are of valuable strategic importance for the Union, not only to reach our climate ambitions and respond to climate change, but also in terms of ensuring a fair and yet competitive energy transition. Since the last year, the Commission presented initiatives to step up the climate ambitions, not to reach only target for 2030, but also for the long term. I think that we need to update existing legislation, but we need also new proposals as well, for example, in the field of renewables. For Member States to achieve the decarbonization target, we need first an achievable target for all Member States, taking into consideration also the different starting points of each. We need an agreement that would be beneficial for everyone. Secondly, I may say that we, the policymakers, need to ensure the transition possible for all regions, including those dependent on coal, and that no sector of industry should be further affected, especially given the COVID-19 economic pandemic impact. We need to back the green transition with a consistent and horizontal energy policy and a modern, climate-neutral, highly resource-efficient and competitive industrial base in the EU. As a conclusion, along this way in the process, we need to ensure consistency across policies, streamline Green Deal ambitions, with a feasible transition, leaving no region behind, ensuring further the resilience of our energy system and the security of energy supply. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Robert Heischel. 1 minute.
Very much. Renewable energy and energy efficiency are the cornerstones of the energy transition. Renewable energy will provide the majority of clean electricity in the decades to come. However, huge capital will also be needed to transform Europe's energy infrastructure. Strategic choices about where to invest must be made now, taking into account the need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. But take the gas as a fossil fuel. It can be a helpful bridging transitionary medium to be used in many Member States if we want to achieve our ambitious climate targets. The gas infrastructure can be used also for the clean hydrogen technology, if slightly modified. We need to stop talking only about the energy targets. We have to speak on how to implement these. Today, our role is to facilitate a just transition and also recovery by linking those opportunities with the needs of people who don't want to fall into energy poverty, where are already about 50 million Europeans.
Thank you. Thank you. Manuela Ripa.
Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Colleagues, on a daily basis, we talk about the European Green Deal and describe in detail how to tackle climate protection. And then we see the figures that we thank the Commission for provided. 50 billion a year is what Member States spend on fossil fuels, fossil energy, the third highest level of subsidies in the EU. It demonstrates the level of contradiction across governments. We want to increase carbon pricing. We know that it's too low, but then we see that Member States are spending this huge amount of money to make carbon cheaper. So let us immediately stop energy subsidies for fossil fuels and invest instead in renewables. The Commission is asked to table this type of proposal to Parliament, and you will receive a round of applause if you do so.
Kommission kann
Thank you. We will now hear from the Commission.